Sorry, Dad. Did she do what? I sat and looked at my father, unable to believe what he had just said. I looked at Jody, her mouth open and her eyes darting between me and her father as if she were watching a tennis match. She went on a cruise with another man, he repeated. After asking my permission, I told her no, but she still left. Jody stuttered. This is a joke. It can't be true. She'll be home in an hour or... Wide-open eyes darted between us. Or you misunderstood. Or what did you do to make her do this? She screamed, cried, although something in her head told her that no, this was not a joke. And yes, he heard everything correctly. Dad blinked twice, lost in thought. Cannot imagine. I never cheated on her. I never hit her. I never... He paused, realizing that his list of nevers was probably endless. Taking a deep breath, he lightly slapped his hands on his knees. It doesn't matter in the short term. It's time for dinner anyway. We decided to get takeout because no one was in the mood to cook. While we were eating, Jody kept glancing at the door to see if her mother would come through. The mahogany table seemed fantastically large, and my mother's empty seat silently cried out for attention. Hours passed, and she still did not show up at the door, did not call, did not email, did not send SMS. I think that's when Jody realized that Dad had nothing to do with it. She forgot about us, Jody muttered. She was always closest to her mother. By nature and on my own initiative, I was a daddy's girl. He taught me how to drive and balance. My dad isn't the strongest guy, but he's been taking me to Aikido classes since I was first accepted. He said he wanted to do it when he was younger, but his grandparents couldn't afford it. Jody was also enrolled there, but with her mother's blessing, she opted out. Dad came to every training session, every competition, every tournament. When I entered high school, I already knew how to count, thanks to the fact that I sat with my dad and watched him work. Thanks to this inclination, I also fell in love with science. I wasn't going to be in the choir. I wasn't going to play the lead role in the school play. It was Jody's world, along with my mother. I think Jody understood that if everything was as Dad said, then everything would not be as it seemed at first. Hey, stop it, I said, hugging her. Maybe she'll come to her senses and walk through the front door tomorrow morning. We will have pancakes and we will make her apologize and take us to the store or to the cinema. Yes? It was clear from her face that she wouldn't buy any of my nonsense, but I had to keep up appearances. Yes, this can happen. Let's go to bed and see what tomorrow is like. Tomorrow, as it turned out, was damn similar to the previous one. No mom. Dad made pancakes, kissed us both, and asked what we wanted to do today. I looked at Jody, then at him. It seemed a little... wrong? Listen, he sighed, sitting down at the table. I'm not going to lie to both of you. The marriage is over. The fact that she left me. Us, Jody interrupted. For us, said the father, smiling slightly and nodding his head, does not change the fact that we still have to live our lives. Today is the first day of your summer vacation. You, he tilted his head toward Jody, will start high school in the fall. This is your last break from high school, and you, he smiled at me, only have 2 years left, and you will take off in my car at every opportunity. I don't know what will happen or what the situation will be, but I'll be damned if we sit around and mope because your mother decided to blow up our marriage. So let's pull ourselves together and decide what we want to do this week without her. Jody began to cry when he finished speaking, and the crying turned into outright heart-wrenching sobs. Dad and I hugged her, held her, stroked her, just tried to get her to breathe. When she came to her senses a little, Dad squatted down next to her chair and looked into her eyes. Baby, what's the matter? She promised me that today would be our day. She knew that you both would take this first day and maybe go to the dojo or play ball or something else that you both love to do. But we will. She promised. Her breathing began to become unsteady and tears began to well up again. What did she promise? I asked. Jody stared at the ceiling, trying to catch her breath, tears streaming down her face. You'll think this is stupid, but it was supposed to be a spa day. She joked that you both would smell like sweat, dirt, and ink, while she and I would smell like cucumber, vanilla, and eucalyptus. Dad straightened up. He looked at me, and I nodded. I understood what he was thinking, and what we wanted could wait. Spa day, huh? Well, I could use a nail treatment. And you? I grinned. Do you see these eyebrows? Hell yes. I want to go to the spa. Jody looked at both of us. Well, come on. We won't be there all day. Dad needs a facial and possibly a pedicure. A small smile appeared on her face, and she jumped up and hugged us both. She ran up the stairs, stopped halfway, and ran back down, and crashed into her dad at full speed. "Thank you, Daddy," she whispered, then turned around again and ran back up the stairs. "Are you sure you don't mind?" Dad asked. "Oh, yeah. More than. But I have to say," I turned and looked at my father, "I hate her. For what she did to you, to our family, and to Jody." Dad came up, put his hand on my shoulder, and kissed the top of my head. "I'm with you." The spa day was a great success. Jody seemed happier, although there was an undercurrent in her that I couldn't quite put my finger on. Dad, of course, demanded that we post a selfie on Facebook, and there we were. 3 faces in green masks grinning at the camera. To this day, this photograph hangs on my wall near my dining room table. Sunday came and we got down to business. Dad decided to change the locks, and we went to Home Depot to buy all new handles and deadbolts. When we got home, Dad said he was going to do it himself, but Jody insisted on helping. We hadn't heard from Mom since Thursday night, and we knew we were the last thing on her mind. I think Jody saw this as a reason to break up with the woman who left her for sex. Monday came and Dad left us after breakfast to sort out the banking and credit cards. He came back for lunch, and then we went out for ice cream. On Tuesday, Dad went to see a lawyer about divorcing Mom. The results were not very good. At best, we could count on a 50-50 split. But if Mom got the right judge, she would get custody, a house, and more. Most of the money. Dinner was quiet and gloomy. We knew what we wanted, but we were worried about the worst possible outcome. Dad tried to put on a brave face, but we knew he was afraid of becoming a part-time dad. After dinner, we all went upstairs and went to our rooms. It was still early, but I knew that each of us was lost in our own thoughts. A few hours later, I was getting ready to fall asleep when I heard a knock. The door was opened by Jody. "Can I come in?" I nodded, and she came in and sat on my bed. I plopped down next to her, and we both lay down, shoulder to shoulder. We haven't done that for years. "What do we do?" she asked, looking at the ceiling. I still had the plastic glow-in-the-dark stars there. If I could, I would go out into the yard at night and look at the stars. If not, then they were in my room. With what? With us. Dad. With this bitch. I sighed. Don't know. Dad has always been someone who likes to plan everything, a logical person. And there is nothing logical here. This is true. Crazy. Crazy. This sums up the whole situation. I had no idea what would happen next. And if you don't know what will happen next, how can you know how to prepare for it? Jody asked me, what if what the lawyer said is true? That Mom can stay with us, the house and his money. But what if he's wrong? I thought for a second. Maybe everything will turn out for the better. Jody nodded, looking straight at me. You don't believe it. No so much. And in the worst case? What do we do? I paused again. What will we do in the worst case? You don't buy car insurance for all those days when you calmly drive to work and back. Don't take out health insurance on days when you feel well and ready to work. So why do I try to plan for every eventuality? How about assuming the worst and planning from there? I turned to Jody. Okay, worst case scenario. What does this mean and how do we fix it? And what can't be fixed? What are we going to do about it? This planning session lasted until the early hours of the morning. Mom returned home but found the door locked. Her father cut her off both physically and financially, but somehow she had enough money to not only rent a place, but also hire a lawyer. By the end of the week, she returned to our house. To say that the situation in the house was tense does not describe it. Although Mom was allowed to return to the house, Dad refused to help her bring things into the house. Dad left and lived with a friend while looking for a place to live, and Mom spent every possible minute trying to get us back on her side. This doesn't mean it was easy for me. One evening, a few months after my father moved, my mother came to talk to us. We were both in my room, which quickly became our room. "Girls," she began, "you must understand. I don't want to divorce your father. He wants it, not me. I love him." "You've got to be kidding me," I said. "If this is love, then I wouldn't want to see what you do to someone you hate." "Watch your language," Mom began. "Otherwise what?" I finished. "What, are you going to have fun behind my back? Will you destroy my family? Will you become a famous city slut?" Mom's eyes widened. "What? Who? Nobody thinks that way about me," she stuttered. "Not yet, but they will." My mouth stretched into a wide grin. I felt Jody tense next to me. I looked at her and shook my head slightly. "Don't," I whispered. "She will destroy you," she shouted, jumping to her feet and running up to her mother. "She said she would take pictures of the two of you if you brought him to us, and tell everyone that he molested her." "Jody, what the hell?" Mom's eyes narrowed at me. "Would you do this? I would lie under oath, send an innocent—" "Innocent?" My voice became louder and perhaps an octave higher. "A man in prison ruined my reputation because of what your father is doing?" Mom's eyes filled with tears. "Do you hate me that much?" I looked at her. One breath, two breaths. To her. While the divorce was going through the courts, my mother gave it her all. Spa days. "Don't you have enough of the face masks you already have from strangers?" I threw back at her. "Shopping trips." "No thanks. I like underwear that I plan to wear for more than 40 minutes. Skating. I'm fine. Waiting until hell freezes over." Finally, Mom got tired of it. "Why can't you be like Jody? She understands everything. She knows I still love your father. All he wants is to stop the divorce. And stand next to me while you have fun in half the city?" To be honest, I didn't expect the slap. I certainly felt it. And it made me determined to spend even more time in the dojo. Mom, to her credit, looked devastated when she realized what she had done. "Did Miles teach you this?" I asked, hearing her extolling his virtues ad nauseum. "Now he insists on child abuse? Nice, Mom." I looked at Jody, who was white from the sound of the slap. "It makes you wonder what she will ever do to you." My hand touched my cheek. I slowly walked to my room, hearing my mother sobbing on the floor in the hallway. From that day on, she never asked me to go with her and Jody again. I have a feeling I'd be welcome, but she's focused, no, redoubled, her efforts on keeping Jody on board. I think she realized that I would never think of her as anything other than the traitor my father had the misfortune of marrying, and she abandoned me as a lost cause. More than a year later, the divorce was granted. I was under the impression that my age gave me the right to decide which parent I would live with, but the judge apparently didn't think so. Mom got custody, which meant Dad had to pay child support for Jody and me, as well as pay for the house and child support for his wife. In essence, the worst has happened. Time passed. I turned 18, which meant that my father's alimony for me ended. I went to a community college to get the necessary knowledge and started teaching classes at a dojo to earn money. My father had a spare room in his apartment, and I moved in with him to reduce my living expenses and help him. He didn't go on dates. He said that he didn't really trust women. With the exception of the current company, he added with a grin. He left H&R Block, so tax time wasn't such a big deal anymore. His new office had a gym, so in addition to strenuous Aikido training, he did weightlifting and a lot more cardio. He was hooked, and soon I had to return him to the dating pool, both for his own sanity and because I had met a guy, a really nice guy, and I could easily see us one day, leaving my dad all alone. Winter turned into spring, spring into summer. I worked harder than ever, teaching multiple classes with large groups of children. Sensei estimated that I taught 150 children and raised the possibility of me taking charge of the dojo. I discussed it with my dad. He knew I had always wanted to teach, and this was a great way to get my foot in the door and see if teaching kids was right for me. And he noted that I would be able to teach what I liked. We thought about this topic a little more, and I agreed. Sensei sensed the hesitation, smiled broadly, and asked what else was on my mind. I hesitated slightly and asked about buying a dojo right now. He chuckled. "You were my best student for many years," he said. Sighing, he lowered his head slightly. "You know that I got married young, decades ago. And just 5 years into our marriage, she died of a stroke, unexpectedly. Just like..." And he snapped his fingers. "I loved her with everything I had and never wanted another. For the last 60 years, this has been my life. And now, I can't do this anymore. Not like before. My health doesn't allow it. My soul doesn't allow it. You don't have to worry about buying it. I've been planning to give it to you for a long time. Who else can I trust with him?" A smile appeared on his face again. "You just have to... Wait, you..." I felt my eyes fill with tears at the thought. 6 months, maybe less. Another sigh. "I would like to have children, so that a part of me continues to live." He looked towards the window, seeing something that was not there, another world where blows do not take your loved ones. Maybe a daughter who looks like her mother. His gaze focused. "But she must have your spirit, your soul." He looked into my eyes. "I know what has happened in the last 3 years. Finish what you're doing. Don't let it consume you. Use that energy on Billy." "Williams," I corrected gently, realizing that he was teasing. "And have your own children." Pause. "And try to remember the old man from time to time. Will you continue teaching as long as you can?" "Anything is better than watching Wheel of Fortune," he replied. And he taught for another 5 months, the last week sitting in a chair and giving instructions in a voice that grew weaker by the second. It beat the 6-month forecast, but not by much. I changed the name of the dojo, but left a large framed photo of the sensei in the main room, so that everyone can imagine the old man in their thoughts. Jody turned 18, and I invited her to dinner at a local bar and grill the following Friday. Of course, she was too young to drink, but I knew the management and most of the people who dined there, and no one cared that she was too old to drink. The week before, I told her that I had some dirt on Miles, and I was going to share it with her over dinner. She arrived quickly, at 6, with her retinue behind her. "I'm sorry," she began. "You told them." My voice rose, my eyes darting from my mother to Miles, his bald head, to some thin old guy walking behind him like a servant waiting for orders. "I had to," Jody said. Miles and Mom were sitting in chairs across from the table, Miles directly in front of me, Mom to his right. Jody was sitting to my left, and the eccentric stood a few steps behind, frantically shifting from foot to foot. He looked clearly out of place, and all heads were turned in our direction. "Do you really think you can threaten me?" Miles began. He looked intently into my eyes, trying to portray himself as Svengali, an evil manipulator. "Tell me what you think you know." I grinned. "I beg you. I'm not some cheap slut." I heard my mother gasp at this. "Who melts as soon as you look in her direction? Now get out, boy. You got me." I turned to Jody. "Are you ready to place your order? Don't you dare ignore me." I glanced at him, grinned, then turned back to Jody. "The burgers here are simply mind-blowing." He stood up and leaned over the table. What? You think, as if, you have, on the, me." As his voice became louder, I saw some strangers in the building begin to move towards us. I made a subtle wave of my hand, letting them know that everything was under control. I stood up, looked him in the eyes, and calmly said, "Fuck off, moron." "What now?" I foresaw the slap. She was ready, and with a few movements, she laid him face down on the floor. Usually in Aikido, you twist and hold your attacker, but I quickly stepped back. Miles was on his feet in a matter of seconds and rushed at me, until he noticed pistols pointed at him by off-duty police officers. They witnessed the whole thing and asked if I wanted to press charges. I said what I wanted, and then the police on duty appeared and took him away. Needless to say, dinner didn't go exactly as planned. Mom screamed at the top of her lungs for Miles to be released and followed the police as they frog-forged Miles out the door. Miles was taken to the local jail. His lawyer was contacted, but there was no court over the weekend, so Miles had to spend it in jail. At 11 o'clock in the evening, he was taken out of the cell and taken to one of the interrogation rooms, where they handcuffed him to a table. And then they brought me. I felt his gaze on me as I slowly entered the well-lit gray room. I pulled up the chair in front of him and watched as he took a breath, ready to speak. I held up one finger in the universal wait sign. About 15 seconds later, the door opened and Jody walked in with 2 white styrofoam containers in her hands. She handed one to me and immediately opened hers. The smell of freshly cooked burgers filled the room. I sniffed and looked at her. "Onion?" "Indeed." "Don't judge me," she said with a mouthful of beef. I took a huge bite, enjoying the taste. She looked at Miles and stopped. "Oh, sorry. I'm being rude. Would you like some?" "What's happening?" he growled. "Let me tell you a story," I began, "if you have time." "He has the whole weekend ahead of him." "Don't talk with your mouth full." "Sorry," Jody muttered. "You really can't help but like them." She looked at my mouth. "You've got a little ketchup on you." She pointed to the corner of her mouth and then plunged back into her burger. I took a napkin, wiped away the nasty stain, and turned back to Miles. "So, 4 years ago, my mother sold herself to another man, destroying our little happy family. She, of course, had a hand in this, but you seduced her, gave her the means and motive to do it, and he considered himself untouchable. Simply put, you made us angry." That first week that she was gone, Jody and I were thinking about what we would do if things turned out badly. We didn't know what exactly worst would mean, but we had a general idea. Mom and Dad would get divorced, you and Mom would still be together, Dad would be ripped off by the court system, which didn't give a damn who was to blame. We knew we wanted to stay with Dad, but thinking about the worst-case scenario, we thought it wouldn't happen. And if this does not happen, then what should we do? Jody sighed and tossed the tissue into the empty container. "It was so delicious. I told you." She looked at Miles. "We decided that one of us should help Dad, and the second should be on the mother's side, so to speak. Collect information to pass on to others. We decided that it would be too out of character for her." She looked at me, "to suddenly become her mother's friend, so this responsibility fell on me. But I was still angry, and my mother understood it. So she did what parents always did. She tried to buy my love. And apparently she used your money, since my mother could not afford the clothes and jewelry that she bought me. Now I have taken up this story." "You gave her your card, didn't you?" Miles stared at me. "And your stupid ass didn't even think about taking it back. And judging by your behavior, I guess that your accountants were too afraid to mention all the write-offs from her, just continuing to pay the bills." And then Jody had a brilliant idea. She bowed slightly. She started collecting receipts. And when Mom wasn't home, Jody and I would take all those purchases back and get cash back. It seemed to me that I could actually see steam coming out of his ears. Cash that was given to my father. Dad would never take money from his girls, but take your money? Oh yes, he didn't mind. There were months when returns amounted to thousands. I won't lie, I kept some for myself. So like, thank you. I saw her looking at my potatoes. "Are you, going to finish it?" Sighing, I moved it towards her. "Where did I stop?" "Oh yes, on money. You see, Dad is an accountant himself. He knew people would be interested in car payments, rent, and utilities beyond his income level, especially when he added in the draconian deductions imposed on him by the court. But food, clothes, electronics, they had no way to track it. So, thank you for paying for our weekly restaurant dinners, my new laptop, and his wardrobe." "Funny," Jody said. "That was enough to make Dad think about the rest of your business affairs." He said what we were doing was a simple version of money laundering. So he took his problems to one of the companies, I don't remember which, and ended up becoming their contractor. Pretty neat, huh? Oh, and here's another thing. You were actually on their radar for a while, but they had nothing to latch onto. However, thanks to the court's divorce, Dad had to keep Mom's phone in his tariff plan. And this is the phone from which you wrote an SMS and called. That is, Dad had your phone number, which he could legally give to the feds since it was on his account. Pretty cool, right? As for all this, I said, spreading my hands, indicating the room. You see, this was also planned. You know who brings their kids to martial arts? Policemen. And many. Over the years, I have gotten to know them quite well. Found out where they like to hang out and all that. And they protect their children and, by extension, the people their children are attached to. Imagine if someone attacked their children's favorite teacher. In a place where cops hang out all the time. Many. Such a person would be quickly arrested, right? And I bet I could arrange a meeting with this guy late at night in an interrogation room with a faulty camera, because these cops know who you are and what have you done to my family, and they saw what you did to me. I dried my hands and put the napkin in the container. By this time, Miles had calmed down. What is your ultimate goal? You know that on Monday I will leave here. Oh, and girls, thank you for pointing out the broken camera, because I can tell you, the judge who made such a harsh ruling against your father, I paid her for this. And on Monday I'll be out of here because my lawyer will find the judge we need to sign the order. Make no mistake, I'll be out of here in time for lunch. He grinned. And then I'll make sure you pay for each one. Minute, sign, your disrespect. You have no idea who you messed with. Jody and I looked at each other and stood up. Goodbye, Miles, I said, and knocked on the door. We were released, and we looked at the officer. Just as you planned, Will said. When you gave the signal, the camera turned on again. We have his confession about the judge. I'd like to say that Miles was proven wrong, that we have enough evidence to keep him behind bars for decades. But I can't. Miles seemed to be just as arrogant, just as harsh in prison as he was outside of it. You know who else makes sure their kids learn martial arts? Bad guys who worry about their children and their ability to protect themselves when their parents aren't around. I knew some people serving time in prison. The funny thing about prison is that people in prison are either serving a short sentence, getting out of prison, or awaiting sentencing to go to prison. Some of these people know that they will spend the rest of their lives inside the four walls of prison, so they have nothing to lose. To this day, I don't know who did it, but on Sunday, on the way to lunch, Miles was stabbed to death. Perhaps it was someone upset by the way he treated me. Perhaps someone he angered. Perhaps someone who just wanted to kill someone for the sake of killing. Whatever the reason, Miles never left. After that, my mother broke down. She naturally blamed Jody and I for causing his death, which is partly true, so I'll accept it and admit it. Bruce annulled the marriage shortly thereafter, and although the court documents don't say anything about why, I think the dynamic of the relationship was ruined without Miles. Mom began persistently trying to get her father back. He politely told her no, then not so politely. Then he got a restraining order against her. Then he called the police when the restraining order didn't work. She eventually moved in with Millie, who seemed as distraught as my mother. Mom wouldn't talk to Jody or me, considering us complicit in Miles's death, and deservedly so, and Dad wouldn't talk to her, so she slowly disappeared from our lives. There was a hole in the place of the mother we loved, but it was as if she had died many years ago. The father eventually met a widowed woman at Mass and moved in with her. She seems to suit him well. A few years after Miles's death, he was brought into a federal government agency, so I guess I can say that my dad is a federal man. Jody? She has trust issues. Not just because of what her mother did to her, but because of how she lied to her mother's face, repeatedly, from the age of 14 to 18. And she became very, very good at it. She hardly trusts herself, let alone many others. At the same time, I trust her completely. She put her family first for a long time, and I will never forget that. We were never able to find a judge. Once Miles died, everything he said became just rumors. Without evidence, nothing could be done. However, the investigation became known, and money for her re-election campaign suddenly dried up. She lost her election, and from that day on, she was shunned in good society. As for the investigation into the rest of Miles' activities, it continues to this day. Will and me? We got married and had 4 children, all girls. Charlotte, Billy, Jody, and Elizabeth, after my middle name. Why not the first? Because I was named after my mother, Mary Elizabeth Caldwell. Years ago, when my mother decided to destroy our family, I made sure everyone knew. Liz, Lizzie, Elizabeth, Beth. Everyone except Mary. Mary was and remains dead to me. Subscribe to our channel so that your second chaff doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think about listening to the next one.